says they're watching and you subtract one. Subtract
I
one,
see.
but but then if we all log in there, that's
Yeah,
going
you
to
subtract one for all of us.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Yeah, I usually get here at 6. Well, actually like 5:30 to start setting up and then hang out with whoever's here. Sometimes we have people get here early.
Okay.
And then real meeting starts at 6:30, so we started. Oh yeah, it's live on YouTube now.
Is it? It's saying,
That's what it's telling me.
Yep. That's it.
yeah.
It's live.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
There it is. This meeting is being live streamed.
okay. There we go. It was stuck on a screen saying setting up, and that seemed to take forever, but then it finished.
Did Zoom crash for anybody else just a minute ago, or?
No,
I'm still here.
No.
Weird. Yeah, mine just like totally crapped and back now.
Well, okay. All right.
give me a minute while I get feedback from the second system connect.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Oh, 2 watching now, and I'm one of them. So
Subtract me.
okay. So subtract me and subtract you. There's 0 people watching.
I just went ahead and connected it without audio because there's no point.
So I see we have Tom Howard and we have Nick on. Hi, Tom. Hi, Nick.
Yeah. And see Lansing, that's Joe, right? With his,
Yeah.
his
That's my second
house.
system.
Yeah. Okay.
I have in my notes here that I had tried Barrier on Raspberry Pi and had some issues with it had a bug. This was probably 2 or 3 years ago, though. It had a bug with using all the CPU. And so I searched for another one and I found X2X, which is a Debian package. So that might be another one to check out also, X2X.
That sounds like it's for the X Windows system, which newer Linuxes, you're not going to have that.
Yeah.
And on a
right.
Mac, you're not going to have it. And on Windows, you're not going to have it unless you install an X server.
Yeah.
And who feels like doing that anymore?
I know. Yeah.
That reminds me of back in the day we used to forward your X session over SSH.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean back in the day?
Yeah.
Minus capital L.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. It used to be a
That
lot
was
of fun.
good.
I guess everything I do when I remote, I just need a terminal. So
Yeah.
It's great for university days, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's some things people use, so we have to support it.
Yeah.
If you don't have
Well,
video, you don't show on YouTube,
Oh, really?
including
Oh,
Justin.
that's interesting.
Including Justin
Oh.
doesn't have video. He has a picture.
So
But
if I
does not-
pop up, will it pop up? Here, let me come back.
Hey, welcome.
I still don't see you on.
It takes a minute.
Yeah, the YouTube thing. There's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, we've met a couple times.
I guess it has to pick up changes because like we're gonna switch screens and stuff. So.
Okay, well,
There you
that makes
are.
it hard being recognized.
Yeah, that's like 20 or 30 seconds. You're there.
Cool.
the meeting is being recorded, so if that bothers you,
Yes, it is.
all right, good. I like to announce it ahead of time, just.
Well, I was kind of hoping for more newbies at this point, but we can. I don't know. 6:42.
I've got two
maybe we'll
people
wait
here,
2
so
minutes.
that's a plus.
That's
Are
great.
they Linux newbies?
I guess I would be considered Linux. I have a functioning understanding, but I still need I still need a guidance hand with the things that I want.
Hey,
Well,
we're here for
you
you.
came to the right place.
Came to the right place.
appreciate it. I
How
appreciate
about Nick? I don't know who Nick is. You want to introduce yourself, Nick? What is your experience level? Oh, well.
Maybe he's muted or
Well, he's muted.
He says he's new in chat.
He says he's new. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great.
hi,
That's great.
welcome.
Welcome.
How is this advertised, Jim? Is it on Meetup?
Yeah, it goes out on Meetup automatically. Well, Meetup doesn't let you really post a meeting announcement. There's just a standing meeting the second Tuesday of every month on Meetup. So that's there.
That's all right. I'm a newbie here. Jim out of Lansing here. I found it on meetup.com. I've been meaning to come for a couple weeks here.
Good.
Awesome.
So
Not
an
Linux,
announcement goes
but-
out on Meetup. I write up the announcement on our WordPress site, and that gets aggregated out to the world. I end up seeing it on. I don't know how I get it. Maybe it's through Planet Ubuntu or something, but I get something in my RSS feed for that.
I did not see it on Mastodon.
I posted on Mastodon. They got
Did
some
you?
boosts and some stars.
Okay.
I got a full follower actually.
I posted an announcement on we have a Facebook group. I posted it there, and we have a LinkedIn account. I posted it there.
And
So
then
it
we've
got-
got the meetup for Lansing.
Okay. Well, it got pushed more widely than previous meetings have. So hopefully that translates into more attendees. I know last month we had 2 people private message me asking for more some information for newbies, some more Linux basics stuff. So that's really what drove us to put this meeting together.
So
I
Joe,
got
what
a
do you do? You
question.
have
On
free cams?
Meetup, do you actually add information about each month about what the meeting's going to be about and that sort of stuff?
Can you? I haven't done
You
anything
can.
yet.
Yes, other groups that I'm in, they fill in the details. It's exactly what
Okay.
the meeting's going to be about, and so it's sort of like a separate announcement of that they put each month on the Meetup site, and then
Okay.
people join up, and you can see how many people are coming to this particular meeting, for example. And
I'm
there's an
gonna have to figure out how to
organization
do that.
it does programming, Windows programming. It's called MIDOT Net. And if you spell it all out in capital letters, you'll see how they do it.
Okay. Good. It's good to know.
Joe, how do you have 4 different frames?
I am using a meeting owl. We use it every Wednesday at work, and I talked to my boss, the director, and he was like, "Yeah, you're gonna borrow it after work on Tuesday? Sure." So I bring it because then if we have more people here, not everybody has to have a computer. We've got a big screen that we can look at it up on the wall, and then we can have an in-person meeting, before and after chats. But yeah, it also helps us if there's a question from here, then it isn't just somebody talking in the background. We have the pictures. It's a nice device. I mean, I wouldn't buy one for myself, but I have access to one. I'll borrow it.
Sure.
What's cool how it zooms in on all 3
Yeah.
of you in a separate frame,
Yeah, as
Like-
soon as it recognizes that there's people talking, and if we had like 6 or 8 people, it would switch to them when they started talking, because it kind of tracks how many people and where they are. It only has 3 cameras, but it will migrate them between people.
Okay.
That's cool.
And hey, it supports Linux right out of the box.
Great. All right. Well, why don't we let's get started, eh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, welcome to the September 2024 mug meeting. This should be a really good one tonight. Our presentation is an introduction to Unix and Linux. And it's kind of a brief introduction because there's an awful lot to cover, and we've only got like we sort of agreed we'd try to keep the main presentation to an hour, and then the time afterwards we would spend on Q&A, and there's a lot of stuff we can talk about. So we kind of divided the meeting up, the several topics up into each. Several of the board members are going to have volunteered to talk about their section. And if you look at the MUG website, here, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to share that screen real quickly if I can figure out how. Right there. Share. Right there. So Unix, Linux, the basics is what we're covering today. And we're going to get into a brief history of Unix, entering commands at the command line, file systems, user groups, permissions, package installation, editing files, some SSH stuff, and then the rest of the time will be Q&A. So that's kind of how we're going to do it tonight. And I think because each person's only going to get about 10 minutes for each of these topics, I think we probably want to hold off questions until the end, and then we have lots of time to do questions. I suppose you could submit your questions to the chat if you want, but I don't think we really want to stop the meeting to handle questions because that can quickly derail us. So I think we're going to do that. So
Plus, the question is, what did you say?
Yeah, right. If you didn't hear something, please ask us to repeat it. Let's see. So let me introduce the board of directors. I'm Jim McQuillan. I'm kind of running the meeting tonight as best I can. We have Dave Satwitz. Dave, raise your hand somewhere here. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing my screen because then you can see everybody raise their hand. Okay, so we got Dave Satwitz. We got Justin Triplett. He's there somewhere. Justin, yeah, there he is. Richard Williams, he's over there in the corner. We got Wolf. There's Wolf raising his hand, waving his hand. And then our newest member is Joe Ryan. He's the one at the restaurant with that fancy schmancy device that lets them show everybody there. It's kind of neat. So that's our group. That's the board anyway. Let's see, membership. Dave, you want to talk about membership real quick?
Sure, membership. This is an open group. It has always been that. Everybody is welcome. It's open to everybody. We love y'all. We have an opportunity to become a dues-paying member of the organization. And we have some expenses. They're kind of minimal these days. And so if you feel so inclined, you could become a dues-paying member. It has some privileges. One is you can vote for the board of directors, which will come up in the spring, and then you can be on the board of directors in the committee. However, at this moment, we have enough money to sustain us for a while. We used to have expenses that the biggest expense was renting a room for a meeting, and since we don't do that these days, we don't have a huge need for money. So what we've done is we have suspended the expiration dates for memberships. It's $50 a year, and so everybody's membership currently is being extended by 1 month every month. However, if you'd like to become a dues paying member, you can go to our website. You can do that through PayPal, or you can ping Dick Williams and he'll send you up. And you could then become a dues paying member. But you know, if you don't want to do that, please join us every month.
Show up anyway.
We want you here.
Yeah. Let's see. Jobs looking for people. Are there anybody out here with any information about jobs available? I don't see Gib here tonight.
I always say you should always check careers.msu.edu every Wednesday. They come out.
Okay, great. So
Wednesday,
tomorrow
they
morning,
post new
check
ones.
that. Yeah, check that out. Any more? I'll switch it then to people looking for jobs. Are there people out there looking for a job? Anybody?
I guess I'll say I'm always looking for, I've been doing some consulting, but I want something more regular.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm taking the opportunity to that's kind of why I got into Linux, because I wanted to build something, because I felt like sending resumes out and stuff just feels like I'm throwing it into the void.
Sure.
So I'm like, hey, if I build something, you can't deny what my experiences at that point. So I got a server that I've been working on and things like that. Got a Ubuntu server on it. Still haven't opened it up to the internet, but like slowly been going through it. Just I'm at a point now where I just want someone to at least talk to while I'm going through it.
Right.
My wife has no idea what I'm doing.
Well, that's what this group is. Somebody you can talk to.
Yeah, thanks.
So we appreciate you coming.
Yeah,
Anybody else? It used to be we'd get a lot of people looking for work, but it seems things are pretty stable right now. It's nice.
Everybody wants to tell me where the jobs are at. Then let's go.
All right. Let's see. Stay connected. We send this announcement off for these meetings on our Mug website. If you look at mug.org, you'll see our announcements. We have mailing lists. We have an announce mailing list and a discuss mailing list. Please sign up for the announce mailing list. You'll get, on average, 1 email a month, so it's not very high traffic. And that's how you'll find out about these meetings. We also send the meeting announcements. There is this kind of a standing announcement on Meetup. Now we're trying to send the announcements out more on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you want to join on those groups, please do. We have a Mastodon account. Justin, what is our Mastodon information?
Yeah, we are on Hachyderm. We are at Mug at Hachyderm. I can actually post a link in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat. That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So there's a lot of ways to hear about us. So my suggestion is get on the mailing list, so you'll get that. We also have a discuss mailing list, which is less than 1 post a month. I don't remember the last email I saw on our discuss list. It used to be people always had questions, and you'd send it out to the discuss list, and people would talk about it. But now you can just find your answers on Stack Exchange and everywhere else. But we do have a discuss list, so if you have something you want to start talking about, put your message out there on our discuss, and you can get all those at our Mug website. Let's see, upcoming meetings. Well, obviously tonight's meeting is Linux and what do we call it here? Unix, Linux, the basics. Next month's meeting should be a lot of fun. Author Michael Lucas, who has been here many times, given us some great talks. He just wrote a book called Run Your Own Mail Server, where he has spent like a year and a half writing this book. I think it's one of the biggest projects he's ever taken on. He writes great books, by the way, primarily in the BSD space. It's all system administrator type stuff. He also writes fiction, but in this case, it's nonfiction. So he wrote a book, Run Your Own Mail Server, and he goes into great depth into how to run your own mail server. He's going to give us a talk next month. The book is just about ready to come out. I don't think it's quite available yet in the bookstores, but I think it's going to be very soon. So October Where's my calendar? October. That's going to be October 8th. He is going to be talking about running your own mail server. Beyond that, I've got a couple of leads I'm working on for upcoming meetings. Should be really good. Stay tuned. As always, we'll put the announcement out on the mug on the announce list, and it'll be on the website. Other groups. There, aside from mug.org, there are many other groups in the area. We got SEMCO. Richard Jackson, you want to tell us 10 seconds worth of information about SEMCO? See, where'd he go? There he is. He's muted.
Yes, we are the Southeastern Michigan Computer Organization. Our website is SEMCO. Our meetings are now in person and on Zoom. Hybrid. And
Hybrid,
it works. And if you don't believe me, you can talk to Richard the Tech Man, because he comes to our meetings on Zoom. And we meet at I3 Detroit, which is a makerspace. And if you go to our website, you will find out about it. And if you want to know about parking, if you go to i3detroit.com, they actually have an aerial view as to show the various parking spots.
So when's the next meeting?
It is the second Sunday of each month. And let me look at the calendar here. Oh, shoot. Hold on a second. Let me go get my calendar, and I will tell you exactly what it is. Is somebody looking at a calendar?
I think that's the 15th.
Okay.
Friday is the 13th.
Yes. The second Sunday of each month, meeting starts. Zoom opens up at 1 o'clock. Meeting starts at 1:15.
Great.
And I3 Detroit's an interesting makerspace. I know Justin Triplett's a member there, and they have all kinds of equipment. And if you actually wanted to become a member of that group, that organization, talk to Justin Triplett. He can explain it all. But they have a meeting there, and we use their meeting room.
I don't see where they're located.
So in Ferndale, just south
like,
of 9
kind of
Mile.
off of Hilton, like Hilton and
kind of.
Mile
It's a little
Okay.
east of there. It's actually off of Hilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the easy way to get there is to take I-75, get off at 9 Mile, turn right, and when you go to the first traffic light, that's Wanda Street, you turn left.
Okay, cool.
And I forget exactly how many blocks you go down.
Yeah.
I think it might be about 4 or something.
Well, go to the I3 Detroit site, get the address, and plug it into your map.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll get you there. Okay. Other groups, MD-Lug. Gibbs not here to talk about it. Anybody else here that can tell us about MD-Lug?
MD-Lug, Metro Detroit Linux User Group, or potentially the multi-dimensional Linux Users Group. As you can see in the chat, for those of you that are not on YouTube, and for those of you who are, I will verbalize it. It meets the second Saturday of the month from 12 noon to 3 p.m. That's Eastern time. So that's coming up this Saturday. Right now it's online only. You can go to the website, which is mdlug.org. And if you're inside the meeting, you can look, and I've also posted a Discord chat invite where there's at least a couple dozen different channels of topics, including generative AI, Android, Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and a marketplace, which I'm very fond of posting free items up that come up computer related.
All
Um,
right.
one thing I
Yeah,
forgot
Rich.
to mention, one thing
Yeah.
I forgot to mention is for SEMCO, Southeastern Michigan Computer Organization, if you go to the website and you scroll down about 4 inches, there'll be click here to be connected to the meeting in blue. You click on that, you'll be joining the Zoom meeting if you don't want to come in person.
All right. Thank you, Richard. So let's see. I think we're going to jump into our meeting now. Please mute yourselves. We want to try to give the speaker the courtesy of being the only one with their microphone on, so that everybody can hear them properly. Let's see. Anything else we got to cover? Thank you for coming again. And so who's going to lead us off with the?
I think I'm starting.
History, Joe. Yeah. Okay. So Joe, if you want to share your screen and get started, I'm going to be watching the clock here, and I'll try to keep you restricted to 10 minutes. And let's go.
So I'm going to give a really Zoom getting in my way. Really a brief history, and I just broke it down into, if I can get it to actually connect. There we go. Nope. No, because I got the wrong view. Great. I broke it out into the decades, because there's a long history of Unix and Linux. And I broke them out and I consider them in the zones, and I'll just touch on a couple of highlights. If you go to the Michigan User Group Git hub site, you could see all of the details, and I'll leave with there's some links in there as well, if you really want to read and find out all the gritty details. In the late 60s was the early development. They were using Multics on a mainframe with AT&T Bell Labs and a consortium with a couple other agencies. A guy named Ken Thompson had written a game for one of these mainframes, but computing time was expensive, and he found an unused PDP-7 mini computer. So we decided to write an OS that would run his game on there and compile it. And that's kind of what drew him and several others to start in on developing what would become Unix. In the 70s was kind of an initial distribution phase. Unix got its name as a play on Multics, but they put it as an X. They rewrote it for a different mini computer, the PDP-11. A lot of other AT&T Bell Labs departments started purchasing those systems, those mini computers, and so it started using Unix. In 1973, it was introduced to the public with a talk, but the 1956 trust ruling, antitrust ruling, prevented them actually selling it as a product. So they licensed it mainly to educational and academic institutions. The first user group, Unix user group, started in 1974 because they really didn't support it. They would send it to you on a disk, and you could use it at your leisure. You could license it without, for the cost of the media and the shipping to get it to you. In 1975, they started releasing it to commercial companies. And in 78 was the first port to another architecture. That's really where it started to be a multi architecture. So you could run it on different types of computers. That brings us to the 80s, which is really the commercialization of Unix. And then it also fragmented in that. In 81, they decided that licensees could sub-license it. So a computer manufacturer could then sub-license it to a user of that computer system. In 1983, where there's another antitrust ruling for Bell Labs, which actually broke up AT&T and Bell Labs into separate departments, but it also allowed them to consider Unix a commercial product. The GNU project, which is GNU is not Unix, so it's kind of recursive. They founded the project to develop an open Unix compatible operating system. In 84, licensing was unfavorable to academic institutions. And so Berkeley created their Berkeley software distribution, which had many of the features that wound up in Unix at the time started in that Berkeley software distribution, which was known colloquially as BSD. In 85, Steve Jobs started developing an operating system based on a mock kernel and items he derived from FreeBSD and other BSD releases. And then in 1989, the GNU project's operating system was sort of ready, but the kernel and the device driver had stalled, and so they didn't really have an operating system that could be distributed to users. And that brings us to the 90s. And Linus Torvalds started the Linux kernel project, which was a re-implementation of Unix from scratch. He had seen Minix, which was an educational-only operating system, but it had an educational license restriction, so you couldn't use it for anything else, and he didn't like that. So he started the Linux kernel project, and he started this re-implementation of a Unix kernel. In 1992 is when 386 BSD was released after some legal challenges. And had BSD or the GNU project released their kernels before 1991-92, Linux might never have started, because Linus only started it because he didn't see a kernel that he was happy with, the licensing rules, and operated the way he wanted it to. So 1992, they released the FreeBSD stuff. They became FreeBSD, NetBSD, and OpenBSD. There was a lot of fragmentation. People had different standards they were trying to use. There were many working groups trying to standardize Unix on multiple tracks. And finally, in 1995, POSIX was the agreed upon standard that came from the IEEE, Institute of Electrical Engineers, and I forget the rest. The mid-1990s saw the first use commercial Linux by supercomputing centers, and then Dell, HP, and IBM started to offer Linux as an alternative to Windows and the high license costs of Unix. That brings us to 2000 era, which I consider the consolidation. You kind of have a few players start to emerge as the big ones. In 2001, Mac OS released OS X, which was based on this next step OS from Steve Jobs, which was derived from BSD. A lot of people say it's BSD based, but it was really, he derived a lot of the stuff from BSD, and he used this mock kernel from Carnegie Mellon, I believe. In 2003, the SCO group started to sue vendors and users of Linux, saying that they own the patent for Unix, and the people using Linux were violating that patent. In 2005, Sun released the bulk of Solaris Unix System V code into Open Solaris and said, yep, anybody can use it. The license became more free. In 2007 and 2010, that court case from the SCO group finally got a ruling, and the courts decided that Novell owned the license, not SCO. And Novell stated that they weren't going to sue anybody because they did not believe there is Unix in Linux. So that was the end of suing over using Linux. In 2010, Oracle bought Sun and discontinued Open Solaris. So Unix as it stands today is still a closed platform. You can get the source, but you have to sign a license and pay Oracle to use it. That brings us to the present. There are currently a number of Unix and Unix-like operating systems, and they're generally considered to be a kernel combined with a number of other applications to make up what's considered a distribution. So you'll have your kernel, then a number of utility applications, and that's considered a distribution. So there's Linux distributions, and they exist on the server, desktop. There are gaming handhelds now running them, and also mobile devices with the kernel that's used for Android and, Chrome OS. There are also FreeBSD and a number of other BSD distributions. They're mainly on servers, but there's a small number of hobbyists that like to run them as desktops. It can be used for a daily driver desktop. And then there's Mac OS Desktop, and it is considered the second desktop operating system only to Microsoft Windows. They have a large market share of the they have a market share of the Windows that's second only to Microsoft Windows. which is considered, it's a Unix-like system because it follows most of the POSIX conventions and it has all of the derived applications similar to another Unix distribution. Then there's Windows WSL, which is a Windows subsystem for Linux. It's mainly a virtual Linux machine running on your host Windows operating system, but it gives you access to all the Linux type OS right there in your Windows machine. And then there are Unix. There are still Unix running. Solaris is still being released and maintained by Oracle. It's not clear whether they'll release a new version, but they are still maintaining the current one. They're running typically on mainframes or in other specialized applications, possibly hospitals with databases, and they want support Unix. Unix is what they wrote it under, and that's what they're still running it under. There's a number of Wikipedia links. The history of Unix, Linux, and Mac OS all have their own wiki pages, and they cover a broad history of Linux. And that brings us to today, where you can find Linux on a lot of things. Mainly, I'm going to move right on into using the command line. They can come with a graphical desktop, but that is really just an interface to the command line, and you can do almost everything in the command line with very few exceptions. I can't even think of any exceptions except possibly on Android and Chrome OS, and obviously Windows subsystem for Linux.
Joe,
Mac OS may be another one.
Joe, you're amazing. Right at 10 minutes, you transitioned into the next section, the command line. So I appreciate that. You're amazing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
See, now you've got me off my cadence. So Mac OS may have some things that you can't do in the terminal because it was designed to be a graphical operating system. But most of the time you can get a terminal and do everything, almost everything you need to. Let me stop my share because I think that it was killing me with, I want to. All right, let me share again and see if I can actually get what I want. Wouldn't let me close things, which was really annoying. Yeah, and there. All right. Killing me. I wanted to show. Nope, and I don't want to sit. Yeah, okay. Oh, advanced maybe. Nope. Yeah, Zoom is killing me today. Usually I can share everything on it, but we'll see if all right. So the command line interface to Linux is commonly called a terminal, historical from the days when it was a mainframe and you had a keyboard and a display. And it really wasn't a computer, it was a terminal to the mainframe. So most people commonly call it a terminal, or they'll call it a shell because that's it's an environment to enter commands into, and that's the command line shell. And almost all of the Unix variants can open them. The exception to Android, you have to get an application that allows you to open a terminal. It allows you to do textual interaction with the system. And so everybody see my terminal? I'll increase it. So it allows you to, different shells have different subtle differences, but for the most part, they're all the same. The Mac OS shell is slightly different, but it works predominantly the same. You can enter commands. You get some error reporting for invalid or incomplete commands or any other errors. And then it displays all your output. I'm going to clear it. That's a command we can run just to clear my screen. Normally, if you do have, I don't know if you can see my sidebar. Some OSs come with the terminal showing. My Mac OS, I don't remember if I tagged it to the taskbar, but if it doesn't, then on the Mac control or command space bar on Windows is WSL, and I'm not even going to go into that. You're on your own. On my system, you just press the command bar and it allows you to search. And normally I search for terminal, but it could be the Mate terminal. It could also be Xterm is another popular terminal application. Same thing, a command line interface. And then once you get there, you're presented with a prompt. The biggest things to note is all of the stuff to the left of the $ could be different. You'll notice mine has a username at whatever computer I'm on, and then it'll show me the directory I'm in, which we'll get into later. Then there's the $, and that just indicates the level of the prompt, which implies what permissions you currently have. A normal user with the $, or the root user, which we'll get into with elevated permissions. Some of the things I want to highlight is you can use the up arrow to go to different commands that have been used previously, or the down arrow to go back down. There's a couple of control keys. Control A just goes to the start of the line. So if you type something in and you need to go to the beginning, Control A will just bring you all the way back to the ending. Control E takes you to the end. And that's mostly what I use, is those two. If you need to delete something to the beginning, you can use Control U. And that deletes from where you're at all the way to the beginning. There are commands to move you to the front and the rear, but I rarely use them, so I won't even go into them. You can look them up in the manual pages, which is one of the first command. The only other thing I'll mention is there is tab completion. So if you start typing a command and you don't know what it says, you can hit the tab key and it will complete it for you. Let me find a more... And if there's more than one, if you hit the tab key a second time, it will tell you what commands exist, and you'll have to start typing until it knows what you mean. So see it beep, it'll beep telling me that there's actually another one, this host name control. And with that, I'm going to hand it off for actually file systems, because in Linux and Unix-like systems, everything sort of lives as a file. And so we'll hand it off to Justin for file systems.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Joe. So yeah, let me share my screen and I can talk about the file system a little bit. Just on an introductory level here. Share screen. There we are. I think I can share my whole screen. Yeah, that worked. I think you guys can probably see my screen now. I don't know if I can find my terminal. There we go. Yeah, so I took some notes here. We had this GitHub repo project that we all put our notes in here. And so I'll just keep those up here as well. But yeah, as Joe said, there's a file system. When you're at your command line, you have a context, just like where are you in the file system. And by default, usually it puts you in your home directory, which is actually just indicated by this little tilde, the wavy guy. And that's just like a shorthand for your home directory, kind of just like how the $ is shorthand for unprivileged user. So yeah, you're in your home folder and you need to look for files. And as he started to do, you can, list files. I don't have anything in my home directory right now, or it would seem, but I could use this ls-a to list all the files, which means including hidden files. And we can see that, oh, actually there's a list of other files there that all start with a dot. And that is the difference between a regular file and a hidden file. It's just a really simple convention that's been around since, before my time. And so, yeah, we can see we've got a bunch of invisible files there as well. And so we can actually probably take a look at one of these files. You can just cat a file. It's a funny command that lets you look at the contents of a file, but it's actually also designed to help you manipulate the contents of a file. You can use it to combine files. It's basically saying, give me all the content from this file and put it somewhere. And by default, it's the terminal itself. So you can just cat a file and it spits out the file. and that is our .profile file, which is basically a script that you don't have to worry about too much. It's just an example of a file there. To make a file, we could just make our own new file with the touch command. And that's another kind of a weird command name that's like, well, why is it called touch instead of make file or something like that? It's because you are essentially touching this space in the file system, and it has a timestamp associated with it. So you can say touch this place, and now we list, we have that file, and we can look at the details of the file with the L flag. Just use L in this case. We have one file, and we got a bunch of details here that we'll get into soon, including the timestamp and the name of the file. So that is a file. It's empty. That's what the 0 here is for. There's not a single bit in the file. Yeah, so we have this empty file, and we could also edit the file. I think someone else will be getting into file editing later. And then we can also delete a file. We can remove this file. We can say remove this place. And now it's gone. If we list those files again, we're back to 0. Yeah, so that's how you look. That's how you create a file. That's how you delete a file. You can also make a directory. And that one is actually mkdir, like make a directory. I'm gonna make a directory called new dir, and when I list again, I can see that new dir. If I list all like I do by habit sometimes, I can see everything else as well. But yeah, now that directory in my terminal here, it's colored. If I show the details, we can actually see that some of this junk here in the beginning is a little different. D is for directory. That's the only one that we'll worry about right now. This one is D. It's directory. This was just a regular file. What is a directory? It's just a container for more files. So then we can see what's inside that directory with ls. And there's nothing there right now. In fact, there's no invisible files actually in there either. You might have noticed earlier as well, there was a dot or two in the list of files, and here we're seeing that again. There's a dot and then 2 dots. These are also shorthand notations for the current directory is a single dot, and the directory above this directory is 2 dots. And you can actually use those. If I want to change my current directory, I want to go into new directory. And now that's my current directory. The prompt updates to show me that, which is nice. And yeah, we can also move out, and we can use that handy little double dot to go back to the parent of that directory. And now that's where I am, back in my home. So yeah, we've got that new directory. I'll go back into it and list things in it. There's nothing in it except for those basically shortcuts to the current directory and the directory above. Yeah, we can make a new file. We could say touch new file, and now we've got that there. If we were to edit it, I mean, we could also send some data there with this other command, echo, and that's kind of like a funny command. It touches file systems in this way. It's often used to send data to a file. I can say send that to the new file, and now when I try to display that file with cat, I actually have that message there, and that's stored there all the time. If I did that same thing again, now that message is there twice. So yeah, we've got directories, we've got files, we can put stuff in files, we can delete files. We can also delete directories if we want to go back up out of this directory, and let's say we just want to delete this directory. We can RM-R on the directory. There's also a remove directory, which is actually probably the safer way to go, because this is going to complain and it says, whoa, that's got files in it. And so it's a little safer, instead of just saying recursively right here, we're saying use recursion and go through this directory and delete everything, and don't warn me. Unless there's other reasons to warn you, but you know, we'll get to those as well when we get to permissions. So I will actually, I can delete that file. I can delete that file from outside of that folder because I can refer to it by its path, even just relative to where I am now. So because I am in my home directory, my user is friend, this is my home directory, I can say, okay, we've got that new directory in my home directory, and I can remove new directory. And if I just hit tab again, because there's only one file in there, it auto completes easily. And then I just remove that file. And then now I can remove that directory with remove dir. There we go. Now it's gone. So if I LSA all, there it's gone again. So that kind of gives you the basics of, yeah, how to look and find files. I mentioned that we're in our home folder and we just have these few little files here to play with that are automatically generated for us. I'm using Debian for this example. This is actually in the cloud. This is a public IP address. I'm not serving anything though, so you can try to ping me if you want, but you know, it's a recent install, so it should be fairly secure. So yeah, we're in our home directory. There's also a bunch of other directories. And so, yeah, if we look at where we are, we're like, oh, well, we can see what else is in home. Yeah, that is just a directory. To see what's in there, we'll just have to list the things in there. Looks like we just have a friend there, that friend folder, that's our home folder. And then we can also go back up one more level so that we are just at the root of the file system. That's /. That is shorthand for, this is the top of the file system. Everything on the file system is /something, right? There's no something then /. That has to be part of your current directory. If that is not a file, then it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. I'll clear my screen there. But yeah, let's take a look at that root of the directory. Or root of the file system. Well, it's pretty big, and I've zoomed in quite a bit here. Maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see pretty much the whole thing together. See, we got a bunch of directories. We can see the D over here. Those are directories, these purple guys. We also have some L's. Those are links. And you can see that actually this displays it pretty nicely. Those are links to other files. So it says, oh, this file is a reference to this other file. You've probably seen something like this on Windows or Mac OS, usually called like an alias. On Linux and Unix systems, there's links, and there's two kinds of links, hard links and soft links. Probably not going to get into that, but once you start configuring a web server or something like that, you'll probably end up looking into that stuff. So yeah, we've got a bunch of files and folders here. And so yeah, what is all this stuff, right? Well, every Linux and Unix system is going to be a little different. Like I said, this is Debian. It's pretty standard, pretty common. It's going to have a lot in common with Ubuntu. Ubuntu is basically copying Debian and adding to it. Boot is where we keep stuff that is necessary for booting Linux, the kernel, and then going from there, right? Dev/dev is a special folder where we keep files for devices. They're a special kind of file that yeah, it's not just like a text file or a binary. It's actually a reference to hardware that the kernel provides. So when you are trying to access some hardware, and the kernel is mitigating that access to make sure it's secure and works the right way, that is through one of those files. Yeah, there's a bunch of them, like including your hard disk and USB and all sorts of things. This other one here, etc. or etc. It's short for etc. Latin phrase, and other things, and that is where configuration data is often stored. So if you have a service like a web server or some other application that is running, whether it's a server or whether it's even just something that you use occasionally, its configuration can and often will be and maybe should be in that folder. You can look inside of it. It's going to have a whole bunch of things already because, of course, this really, complete Linux system comes with things like SSH. We'll get into it later. And systemd, and a bunch of stuff about time zones and many other features. X11, the windowing system, and Vim even has a folder here in /etc. If we just look at everything without the long, that name's a little bit more reasonable to see. You can see, oops, that is not Etsy. That's why. There we go. That's everything in Etsy. Perl, those Python even has configuration in here. But yeah, lots of configuration files in there. If Nginx is already in here, it is not. But you could see, Python's configuration files. It's actually just from the Debian installer. So we can actually take a look at that. I'm just listing that file. Yeah, it's really that file. If I want to read it, I could just cat that file. And it's just this 3 lines, some default setting, and nothing that we need to worry about, but that's what a lot of this stuff is just a single file. Can't remember what host name is a file. That's a good one. I think he was just showing you that. Well, because I'm not in /Etsy, there we go. Etsy /hostname is localhost. My host name is localhost. So yeah, that's /Etsy. We can take a look at other files on the file system. I don't want to get too deep into any of them. Media and mount are often where things are mounted. Like if you connect a drive, opt is where additional optional software for the system is installed. If you have an alternative package manager, like you might on Mac OS, like Homebrew, that uses /opt now, I believe. /proc is a special folder that's actually not on the disk. It is generated by the kernel to give you access to information about the system. You can look up information about the CPU, your memory, processes, that kind of thing. Root is root's home folder. It's not in /home. It gets a folder right at the root of the disk. And there's a few other things for system utilities. Run sbin, which is a link to user sbin, which is pretty similar to bin here as well. Bin being more user oriented, where S for system is more system oriented. Those are pretty old notions. They're all command line applications. So it's only system users are usually using those these days. But, it's still user land versus, the more system oriented components. And then we also have temp for temporary files, TMP /TMP. /user is where some things might be installed for the users. And then /var is often where lots of generated data might be, such as log files. So if you have a website or something like that, and you're generating logs of people visiting your website, That's a good place to put it. Maybe if you have a database, it might be storing all of its data somewhere in /var. Mail is often done there as well, backups, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's like the root of the file system. Is just like on any other computer, there's a disk, but in Linux, everything's a file. So that includes some special things like devices and information about the system, and things like that. Not sure how I'm doing on time. I think I've covered.
Oh, you're way over.
Way over. Oh man. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Well, yeah,
It's all right.
that's
Well,
the
Joe was
basics
under.
there.
But it's good. It's a great basic introduction to the file system. I appreciate it.
Don't worry, I'll catch you up later.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on? Dave, are you ready with your users groups and permissions?
Yeah, I'm ready. So we did this here. I've got to share my screen, and what I did is I actually this is a Mac laptop that I'm running on here, but I added a virtual machine to it. So this is running Ubuntu, and there are on here 4 different users. Ubuntu is the base one, the main one, but I added 3 more, Mug 1, Mug 2, and Mug 3 for this. If you're running Linux on your own computer, then I usually wound up with just 1 user because, and people don't even think about that much on a Mac. But if you're running on a server, a big server, there would be hundreds of users, and you're just one of them. So let's log into Mug 1 here. And this is the graphical interface for Linux, for Ubuntu. We'll start up our terminal session here. We are now logged in as Mug 1 on the Ubuntu computer. And there's a command, who am I? Which will tell us that we're Mug 1. And if we've seen this already, we can do an ls-l, and it will tell us that we've got these directories. There's one, the desktop, there's one for documents, one for downloads and various things, and one file here that I've created called Mug 1, which we can cat out. And this will echo out Mug 1 and the date if we run it. And so this is getting now to the file permissions. You see over here on the left-hand side, we have a first letter, which is whether it's a directory or not, because of the magic of how the ls command is working. It's putting all the directory names in blue and file names here, and I guess that's sort of a green. And that corresponds, you can see they have the first letter of their permissions. These are the file permissions, is a D for the directories and a dash for everything else. This is for our file Mug 1. The next permissions here come in sets of 3. So this is RWX, and that's for the user. This user, Mug 1, has 3 different kinds of permissions. The first one is whether you can read it or not, and it'll be either an R or a dash. Whether you can write to it or not, and that's either a W or a dash, and whether you can execute it or not. And so we have this one is now set with the X permission on, so that we can execute it. And when we do that, it runs those just like we had typed them in from our keyboard. So what I'm going to do here now is add a terminal with the plus command here. And I'm going to move this to, I'm going to detach it. So now we have 2 terminal sessions going there. And I'm going to switch users to Mug 2. When I did that, it said that my directory was still Mug 1. Well, we didn't want that because the SU didn't set. Normally, when you log in, you get set to your home directory. When you do a switch user there, you don't. Here in Mug 2, I have, again, one extra file called Mug 2. Again, it has it's got read, write, and execute for the user. It's got just read, write for, now we're going to get into groups and for everybody, just read for everybody. So that's the first 3 letters here are for the user. The next 3 are for the group that you're using, and you can have more than one group. So in Mug 1 up here, if we ask for the groups, this is in Mug 1, and it's also a sudo user. That's we did a switch user here to change to a new user. Sudo is a command that lets you execute things with root privileges. That's very handy for doing things without logging in as root.
What's root?
What is root? Well, root is the user with all of the permissions. It's the God place. You can do anything to the computer if you are root. Now, if it's your own computer, okay, go ahead and do it, but you don't want to be using root all the time, because then you might do things inadvertently, and it's just a safety thing to be using for the username that you're on all the time, day in and day out. It's not root. And if you're on a shared computer administered by somebody else, you're not going to be root. They won't give you that. That's the one that can be used to create and set up everything, throw you out, keep you on, do anything to you. But sometimes you want to be you want to be able to do yourself things that you need root privileges for, and the best way to do that these days is with the command sudo, which stands for switch user and do a command. And then you can, so you can execute as root for just that one command, and then you're done. So what I wanted to do here is add yet another screen here for user 3, and we'll detach this terminal here. I don't have any files here. Why don't I don't understand why I don't have any files. I don't have my desktop and stuff. I don't remember how I created user 3 for those, but that's okay. What I wanted to the groups for user 3 here is just Mug 3. For user 2, I have it set up with yeah, well, okay, I guess I had planned on adding those. It's just in so users and groups. Let's do this. We went through the three sets of three here for the permissions. The next thing here is which user this belongs to and which group it belongs to. And so
what does that mean, a group?
Okay. So I can add here for user 2. I can put that into I can add mug1 as one of its groups. And and here's a place to do the sudo command here. If I do because user 1 is or mug1 is a sudo user. And the command is usermod. And the flags on that are -A for add and -G. And I'm going to add the group mug1 to user mug2. And the control on this is the sudo system now makes me type in, make sure that I know who mug1 is and that I really have permissions for mug1. So I have to put in my own password there. And now it's done that. It gets these permissions on login. So this right now, if I ask for its groups, what I've done is add group mug1 to user group 2. It still has it. What I need to do is exit this. And now I am back to mug1. That's where I logged in. I switched from. Now I've added with this command over here, I've added group mug1 to user mug2. That means that anything over here in mug1 with the group files with the group mug1, user mug2 has permission to access them through its group permissions. So a user can have dozens of groups, and that way you can share files around the around the system, and can control who can access which files. How are we doing on time here? I got more. The execute here we can.
Yeah, I think cover the execute bit, and then I think we gotta call it.
Okay, so here's our file for mug3. And we can see that in this case here, mug3 does not have the execute bit set onto it. So if I try to execute that file, it will say permission denied. I can add the execute bit to it, and that is with a command called chmod, and I don't know why it's called that.
Change mode.
Change mode, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you're changing the mode of the file. The mode is the permissions of the file.
So there's Linux has a system called man for manual, and you can type in man in the command for any of these commands, and it'll give you a documentation for them. It's I mean, in some cases, just mind-numbingly correctly written. You know, so there's a whole nother system that has been developed called TRDL or TLDR, for too long didn't read. And you have to install it, but it comes up with a much more concise and easy to read and use documentation. So here's the documentation for change mode. And what I can do over here in Mug 3 is I can keep keep that visible. Change mod, and what I'm going to do for the owner, and that's for the user. It's U for user, G for group, and O for others, for everybody else. For the user, I'm going to add X to Mug 3. And now we can see that it has the X on it there. That's been added. And now if I try to execute it, it will run as a script. Unix, Unix started with that execute thing. You have to have a special permission to be able to run a file as a script or to execute it at all. I'm sure there's a really good reason for that. It always seemed a little restrictive, but it keeps you from trying to run as a script, a novel or something like that, something that wasn't ever supposed to be executed. And if you create a file with commands in it, oftentimes you'll put an extension in those called .sh for shell, although that doesn't have to be there. You do need to set the bit to execute on it.
All right. Thank you, Dave. There's so much more you can cover. You could spend another 2 hours on this kind of stuff, but we've got other things we got to move on to. So I think, Justin, are you up next? Again?
No, I'm up
not
next.
Justin, Joe.
Yeah,
okay, I can stop sharing my screen, right?
Bit of this.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that again one of these days. But let's move on to package managers. So you want to install programs. One of the key things about
TLDR.
Yeah, well, one of the key things about package managers is if you're installing packages, you have to be able to run as the root user. With some exceptions with other package managers that are out today. All Unix-based OSs or Unix-like operating systems ship with a package manager, or there is one available from the community. So, for instance, Mac OS has Homebrew and some other package managers that you can install after the fact to do the same sort of thing. Package managers allow you to find, install, and get some information about or remove applications and any dependencies. And that's the key thing with a package manager versus there are some other lower level tools that aren't considered package managers. They don't handle the dependencies. And that was a thing in history that it was difficult to manage the dependencies. This package might require a bunch of other things to get installed in order for it to function properly. And modern package managers handle those dependencies for you. All you need to do is say, hey, I want to install something, and it will go out and it will find the things it needs to install. It'll tell you what it's going to do, and then it will do it when you say go ahead. And this is from the distribution's software sources or some other locations. Maybe you downloaded a package off the internet, you would still use the package manager to install it because then it can handle the dependencies if there are any in the package that you're trying to install. Everyone has it. Unix, which as far as today is concerned is Oracle Solaris, has their IPS, which is Integrated Packaging System. Linux, that depends on the distribution. For Red Hat-based distributions, you'll have Yum, yet another update manager, or DNF, I don't even know what it stands for. Those are the two that are current for Red Hat distributions, such as Fedora, CentOS, Rocky, and Alma. Debian distributions typically use apt or apt-get, which is a little bit fancier form of apt, but it doesn't do all the things that apt can. Those would be your Ubuntu, Linux Mint, maybe Pop! OS if you're a gaming person. And then, of course, SUSE, it also has a one called Zypper. And then, as I mentioned, macOS has Homebrew. And they all have this common functionality of there's a search function. It might be something different like find or something. It has an info function or show, which will show you some details about a package, such as the maintainer, dependencies, version, source, and more, maybe a really detailed description. You can install, which would put the package on your system so that you can now run that software. Update would update packages in this or the full system in most distributions. And then there's remove, which will remove a package from your system, but it may leave some files behind. So a lot of them include the purge subcommand, which will purge any associated files. Some operating systems do have a graphical user interface front end, but it is typically just a wrapper around the command line interface. So I run these things might be like Ubuntu Software Center or GNOME software, kind of like an app store for your Android phone might be. So I'm on a Debian system, so I have to use apt. And if I do just apt -- help, that will give me some help. And it will tell me the most used commands. I could list packages, search, show, and all the things. So I'm going to apt search. I want to do this. I need an editor. So I'm just going to search for editor. If I spell it right. And then it kind of should tell me all the editors that are available. And you can see it tells me the name of the package, the distribution it's in. And I'm on Ubuntu 2404, which is Noble. And then it tells me a short description of it: Ubuntu or Unicode text editor, graphical text editor. So I can install any of these editors. Some of them might not really be editors because like this Xscavenger is not an editor. I'm not sure why it pulled it up. Something in its description might have said editor. But you'll find an editor in here. And if you know the package name, say I want apt search Joe. There is a Joe editor. So I'll search for the Joe editor. Wow, there's actually a lot of them. But here you got Joe, user-friendly full-screen text editor. Well, maybe I want some more information about that. I'll do apt info Joe. And that will show me the details of the Joe editor. You'll see it's the package name is Joe. There's a version, the section it came from, who maintains it. So the Ubuntu developers actually maintain this one. Who the original maintainer or creator of the software was, where to go for bugs, an installed size. It'll tell you what its dependencies are. And then down here, you'll see the description. User-friendly full-screen text editor. It's Joe's own editor. Not me, of course, but Joe. It has all the features of a Unix edit set. And so, well, maybe I want to install that. I'll do an apt install Joe. Oh, see, here's where permissions come in. Because for most packages, you have to be the super user who is known as root. So I'll do a sudo apt install Joe. Now it will ask me for my password because it's like, you're doing things. If I remember it. And then it'll go, hey, now why it automatically did it, I don't know. Normally it will ask you, do you really want to install it? But it'll tell you the new packages it's going to install. If there were any dependencies, it would put them in there. It'll do the installation. It'll process some triggers. You can see it does a man database. So now it's got its man files. It does some desktop file utilities because I'm on a desktop system. And then it updates the alternatives. So now it's using my editor will actually be Joe. You can set that to be anything. You can set the alternatives to use a specific application for a purpose. And so there's the editor purpose, which now will be Joe editor. because I just installed it. So it was, well, you must want that for your editor. So that's what it's done, is it is providing the editor functionality will be user bin Joe. So now I have the Joe editor installed. If I wanted to show the policy for that in apt, it's apt policy Joe. It will tell me it's installed with a version. It'll say, hey, there's a new candidate if there's a newer version, and then it'll tell you the version table and where they're located. Here, there's only two places. It's the Ubuntu archives, and then my local status says, hey, it is installed. And if I want to remove it because I go, I don't like that editor anymore, now I can do an apt remove, or if I wanted to get rid of everything, I could do an apt purge, and that would get rid of all the installation files. So I do an apt purge Joe, but you have to use it as sudo because you got to be the root user to do so. Now, I'm going to do a shortcut, which is the exclamation, which simply means do the last command I did right after whatever I put before it. So the exclamation will just do the very last command I did. And see, it even shows you the command you're going to do. The sudo apt purge Joe. It says, hey, you're going to remove that package. Do you really want to do it? Yes, I want to do that. So now it updates alternatives to provide editor. Yeah, and it goes back to Nano. And I'll have to change that because I like Vim. But that's your introduction to package managers. It's how you install applications. Now, I don't know if I have any. Let's see if I have any debs downloaded. And I'm using the asterisk to say anything with a .deb extension. So you can see I've got the VS Code downloaded. And technically you can do an apt install with your package manager of this file, and it should satisfy any dependencies. And there's an underlying command that's actually run. You'll see this dpackage thing sometimes on Ubuntu systems, and in Red Hat systems, you'll see RPM. That's the underlying command that's running for each individual package, but that doesn't do any dependency resolution. So you'll see even here, I go up, see, here's this dpkg. That's the underlying command it's running. Of course, I have to do sudo. Now it'll probably say that's already downgraded. Oh, it's downgraded because I have a newer version, because I have auto updating done. So it would technically downgrade it, but you can see that I don't have to use dpackage to do an individual package. I can use apt, and it will know that, oh, you want to install that single package that you downloaded, but you also want to go out and get any dependencies. Now I'm going to say no because I don't want to downgrade it. And that's an introduction to package management. It's how you install packages. Now, as I said, some places have a graphical front end. You can see I've got the Ubuntu App Center, which kind of gives you a little graphical. I can search for things. I can find stuff, but there's not as much research that goes into whether it should be in there or not as you'd like. There may or may not come from reliable sources. So it's always best to know where it's coming from. You can look at who the creator is, like this cheese package is Ken Van Dyne. I have no idea who it is. I don't know if his package is good.
I know Ken.
But Canonical has the GNOME calendar. Well, Canonical are the people that produce Ubuntu. It's probably okay. And here, Remina, which is a remote desktop client, you can see it's the Remina upstream developers. So that one's probably fine. And so that's really just an intro to package management. If you want a new application on your system, you're probably going to use the package manager. There are some newer package managers that I'm not going to get into that are like cross-platform and cross-distribution, but that's kind of an advanced topic. And we'll have a package managers class one of these days, or discussion. With that, I'm going to hand it over to, I think we're going to talk to,
well, you're going to talk to me.
Oh, Jim. That's the HTML copies.
Yeah,
Where
we
did you
switched a
pull up
couple
the
of things.
GUI? Where did
Oh,
you pull up the GUI?
so in Ubuntu, it's
for
in the
basic users.
taskbar.
Yeah.
In Ubuntu, it's in the taskbar. And macOS has their own app store. That's the same, similar. It's a front end for package management. In Ubuntu, it's this A app center.
Yeah. Okay, so
On to you, Jim.
Yeah, we switched a couple of things around. Justin had to take off. It turned out he had a prior commitment that he had forgotten about, so he got done with his talk on file systems, and he bugged out. And then Wolf asked if we could do the SSH before the editing, because the editing he's going to be talking about is really about remote editing. So I offered to take up the SSH talk. I've got Justin's notes, and we're going to talk about that. So let me share my screen, or at least one of my screens here. Let me get to it here. Share. I think that's the one. Yes. Share. Okay. So can you guys see my screen? Is the font size all right? Maybe I do that. Thing about Zoom is when I share my screen, I don't get to see what you're all seeing. All I see is the screen I'm sharing, so I can't tell what it looks like. But does that look okay, guys?
Good.
Yeah,
Okay,
things look
good.
good on our end.
Okay, so I'm sitting here on a Mac. Here's my here's my shell. I do an awful lot of work not on my Mac. I do an awful lot of work SSHing, logging into remote servers in a data center. Whether that's a data center that I control with my servers, or a virtual machine up on Azure or AWS. Anyway, I spent a lot of time SSHing there, logging in remotely. Back in the really old days, we had other commands. We had a command called telnet. I'm sure some of you guys remember that. That was a command that let you log into a remote machine. There was also RSH, which let you run a remote shell, basically logging into a remote machine. Very few people use those anymore. I don't know anybody using RSH. I really didn't use it. But telnet I used a lot back in the 80s and 90s. But that's not secure. It's just plain text traffic. So if you log into a remote machine using telnet and you type in your password, anybody sniffing on the wire can see the password you typed in. So that's not good. So along came SSH, Secure Shell. That allows you to log into a remote machine securely. So and it's really secure. It's got great encryption built into it, all kinds of different ciphers and algorithms and stuff. And it's a very, very full-featured remote login tool that can be used for a lot more than just logging into a remote server. But I'm going to show you how to log in. So I'm sitting here at my local machine in my home directory, and I want to log into a server I've called Database One. So I can log in there, and that's a machine in a data center. And it asks for my password, and we can talk about that in a minute. By default, it's going to ask you for a password, and I'm logged in. Now I'm on a machine in a data center, logged in. This is a whole different machine. This is Linux, a Linux machine I've logged into from my Mac machine. So I can list the things in my home directory. I've got a file out in, let's see, actually, let me do this again. I've got a couple of machines called Database One on different domains. I'm going to log out of this one. I'm going to log into Database One, waterford.raris.com. That's the machine I've set up that's got some files on it. Interesting, that one. I've got that one configured to not ask me for a password. So did you see that? I logged in and it did not ask me for a password. I can just log right in. I'll do it one more time. Here I am at my Windows, at my Mac. I run SSH to that machine and I'm in. It's really handy to be able to set it up without a password. This doesn't mean anybody can log in without a password.
It just means that if I've logged into my desktop and I've supplied my password, certain systems I can remote log into and it won't ask me for a password because it already knows I'm authenticated on my machine. It does something called SSH agent forwarding and using a public-private key pair, and it's really quite secure. So anyway, I'm going to get to the temp directory, and you can see I'm on that machine now. And I want to show you something. See, there's a file in temp called test.sql. One of the cool things about SSH is I can use it to securely copy files between machines. There's a couple of utilities for it. SCP, secure copy, is one way to do it. SFTP is another way to do it. A secure file transfer protocol. You all probably remember the FTP protocol or the program. That's kind of like the Telnet program. It works great, but there's no security built into FTP. Somebody snooping on the network can watch you type in your username and password, and then they can steal those credentials and they can log in as you, or they can sniff the wire and capture all the bytes that you're sending with your FTP. So we use SFTP instead, or SCP. So I'm going to drop back to my local machine. So here I am at my local machine, and I'm going to copy that file, test.sql, from that remote machine. So I'm going to do SCP database one.waterford.averaris.com/temp/test.sql, and I'm going to put it here in my home directory. See the /, that's shorthand for my home directory. Boom. See how quick that was? This is over a fast network, so it happened really quick. But if it were a much larger file, in fact, if I see that file up at the top up here, this one, I could download that file, SCP database one.waterford.averaris.com/temp/ewc.sql.bz2. I'm not going to download the whole thing, but you can see it gives you a little progress meter. In fact, it'll be done in a minute, so it's not that big a deal. So here I am downloading a file from the database server to my desktop using SCP. This is secure. It's encrypted. Everything about this data as it comes to me is secure, so nobody can snoop on the line and see what I'm doing. You can also use SFTP, and the SFTP works a lot like the old FTP program. So if you're familiar with FTP, if you've got SFTP set up, if you've got an SSH server configured at the other end, you can use SFTP really easily. It's got most of the same commands that FTP has. You can also use SSH. I'm not going to get into depth about it, but you can use SSH to create tunnels between machines. So I can open up a connection to a machine, and I can tunnel HTTP through it if I want. If I want to run a web server on the remote end and a web browser on this end, I can do that. One of the things I used to use it for all the time was tunneling my X Windows traffic. So I could run an X client program on a remote machine, and I could display the output, the graphical output, on my local desktop by tunneling the X protocol through SSH. It's very, very useful. You can see in a minute and 2 seconds, I downloaded that. I don't know what that thing is. Almost 7 gigabytes in size. Yeah, 6.8 gigabytes. So that's SCP for you. Let's see. Justin had some notes about SSH. Let's make sure I covered them. There's a config file. I'm just going to hit the up arrow a couple of times. Let's get logged back into that machine. There's a config file for SSH on the remote machine. If I go into the .ssh directory in my home directory, see /home/jam/.ssh, there's a config file. Well, all that's there right now is authorized keys. If I log from this machine to another machine, it's going to drop a entry in that file. But I can create a config file, like in my home system. I'm in my home directory.
If I edit my config file, I've got all kinds of things in here. So like shortcuts, so I don't have to type a long name. Maybe I don't have DNS set up, so I want a machine that I can log into that just has an IP address. I can set certain ciphers. I've got an old VPN machine that I can log into that use really old encryption ciphers, so I have to specify it. Let's see, all kinds of stuff. Like I'll set up a machine on Azure, and I don't have it set up in DNS anywhere, but I'll add an entry here, and I'll put my private key, the path name to my private key in my config file, so that when I log into that remote machine, I don't have to use the password. Anyway, so that's the config file. There's a whole bunch more stuff. You can do a man on SSH config, and it'll give you all the settings that you can play with, whether you want to do compression, whether you want to, you want to do an identity file, you want to, there's a million things to do here. Man SSH config. I think, let's see, I talked about SFTP. Let's SFTP to that, SFTP to database waterford.avers.com. And there, it's just like FTP. I can type help and it'll tell me the commands. I can, just like FTP, I can do a get on a file. I can say get test.sql and it gets the file. I can push files using put. I think that's a very basic explanation of SSH, and you definitely don't want to be using Telnet or RSH if you're logging into remote machines, because they are not secure. So with that, I think Wolf, are you ready? Wolf's going to tell us about editing
I
files.
am ready.
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. And when Wolf's all done, we can get into lots of questions if you guys have questions about this stuff. So there you go, Wolf. It's yours.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to talk about lots of opposites. For instance, the difference between word processors and text editors. Word processors, like Word, are great at work for preparing documents you're going to share with your coworkers, whatever. Text editors don't have multiple sizes, styles, and fonts, anything like that. They don't have rulers. They just edit text. And on a Linux or Unix system, most of the configuration files, most of the code, maybe most is the wrong word here. I should be saying all. The scripts, everything that's not a running program is probably a text file. And you edit text files with text editors. You may already be familiar with a GUI, a graphical user interface text editor. The most popular one right now is called Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is cross-platform. So if you're editing on your graphical desktop Linux box, you can run VS Code and you can use it to edit your files. But a lot of the time, when you're editing files, the whole collection of files that you need to change are a lot like what Jim was just showing. They're on some faraway computer. They're on your Azure instance. They're on your Linode server. They're at work and you're at home. There are ways to share the GUIs of those systems. But usually what you have is just a terminal. All you have is the command line. All you have is text. So not only are you not using your local machine, you're using a remote machine. Not only are you not using a word processor, you're using a text editor. Not only are you not using a GUI, you're using a command line editor, a text-based editor. You only, probably, you're just a user on this remote machine, as Dave was showing us with the different users on these multiple user systems, without the permissions to install interesting things. So you have to use one of the editors that's already installed on that system. There are two really well-known text-based editors that are extremely likely to be installed on whatever remote system you attach to. They're very different. They're alike in all the things I just said. They're both text-based, so you can use them on the command line. You don't need a GUI to run them. They are both text editors. That is, they're only for editing text. They don't make paragraphs and Word documents with lots of fonts and all that stuff. They can be used to edit configuration files and Git commits and source code and all of the things that you want to edit on these remote machines. And they both have help. So they're alike in those ways, but they are different in so many other ways. Let me tell you the two editors that we're going to talk about tonight. One of them is called Vim, and you saw Jim use Vim to look at his .ssh config file. And the other one is called Nano. Now, Vim is probably going to be the default editor when you connect to a machine. So if you get into a situation where something launches an editor automatically, it's probably going to launch Vim. This is unfortunate because the ways that Vim and Nano are different are that Nano is simple and fairly small and easy to run and easy to learn, and Vim is big and complicated and takes a long time to learn and does a lot of stuff, and even has its own language built into it for writing code that makes Vim do more interesting things. Vim is hard to use. I love Vim. I've spent a long time using it, long enough to learn how to use all the parts. And we've actually made videos here at Mug about how to use Vim. But I want to recommend to you as a beginning Unix or Linux user not to use Vim. If you're going to edit a file, you should probably use Nano. Now I'm going to show you both of these editors, and I'm going to start with Vim. Let me share my screen. Boy, that doesn't look very big. Is it big for you guys? Anybody?
Looks okay.
All right.
Yeah, looks good to me.
So here I am on my home system. If I say ls, you can see this is a Macintosh. You can see all my top level Macintosh directories like desktop and library and movies and public. If I were going to edit a file here, I could use VS Code or whatever. But that doesn't matter to me. What I need to do is I need to get to my remote box. So I'm going to use SSH, just like Jim just showed you, to get to my Kubuntu box. That box happens to be in the office with me, but we're going to pretend it's 1,000 miles away. So now I'm on my Kubuntu box. I didn't have to type a password because I had an SSH key already stored and hooked up to this particular address. So it knew what key to use and let me in without me doing anything, but in a way that it wouldn't let anybody else in. So now if I say ls, I see the directories that come in a graphical Kubuntu installation. If I ls -a, just like Justin did, I can see all of these files, like my bash profile, my bash RC. I'm going to cat my bash RC so you can see the text that's in it. There's a lot of stuff in there. And then I'm going to edit it with Vim, again, just like Jim did. My Vim is all customized, so I'm going to specially say, don't use any of my customizations. I have a configuration file that sets Vim up to act exactly the way I want. I don't want to show you that. I want to show you what you're going to see when you SSH into a remote machine and run Vim. And the file I'm going to edit is my bash RC. -u is not the right thing. Let me just remind myself of what it was. I really thought it was -u. It is -u. What's the deal with it?
Lowercase, maybe? Looks like lowercase.
It is lowercase, and I thought I did that.
Yeah, you did. Okay.
Isn't -u then the name of your file? The name of
It
your
is,
bash
but
RC file?
if you say none or default, those are special names it's
I
supposed
see.
to recognize. Well, blah. Okay, I'm just gonna.
I just tried that command here, and it gives the same error. Cannot read from default.
So here's Vim. One of the differences between Nano and Vim is that Nano is modeless and Vim is modal. So Vim has these different modes, and right now when you start up Vim and open a file, Vim begins in normal mode. In normal mode, you're typing commands. You are not inserting things into the file. To do that, you have to go into insert mode. So for instance, if I hit return, I'm not inserting returns. I am merely going to the next line. In normal mode, you can use these characters H, J, K, and L to move around, but the arrow keys work too. So probably if you're stuck in Vim, you'll want to use the arrow keys. In normal mode, you can type commands. They start with a colon. Do you see down here in the lower left corner of the window, the colon showed up? And I can say things like help Let's see if help modes does anything. So this top section here, this is me looking at two different hunks of text at the same time. The bar that is inverted underneath each hunk tells me what kind of text I'm looking at and what its name is. That bottom hunk is the bash RC file I was looking at. The top hunk is the help. And if I say :help, it goes to the very top of the help file. This is the main help file. :help is the thing to remember. The help file will teach you how to get more help. Let me close that hunk of text with :q. :q means quit. Now it's gone and I'm back to all bash RC. I'm going to use GG. These are all commands that you could learn after a long time, but probably you'll just use the arrow keys. And now I'm going to hit the I key, I for insert. And now I'm in insert mode. And I'm inserting returns. And if I hit escape, I'm back to normal mode, and I can hit U to undo, and it goes back. You can see that the things I'm doing are annoyingly hard. They're hard to remember. They're hard to do. They don't show good feedback unless you've got a bunch of stuff turned on. Let me actually just run Vim with all of my modifications. Here in Vim, the way I run it, you can see in the lower left-hand corner that it says the word normal because that's the mode it's in. And if I hit I, it says the word insert because I'm now in insert mode. Vim by default doesn't show you those things. I use them because they make my life easier. I also have the line numbers showing, and I can go to specific line numbers back in normal mode. Like if I want to go to line 19, I can type 19, see it in the lower right-hand corner there, where it says 19, because that's what I've just typed. It thinks I'm in the middle of a command, and I am. And then I'll hit Shift-G, and my insertion point goes to line 19. The most important thing to know in Vim is :help. The second most important thing to know is how to get out of Vim. And that is by being in normal mode, typing a colon so you can get to a command, and then Q to quit. If you have made some change to the file, then you would write :W to write it out. And you can combine those two commands together. :WQ means write out the file and then quit. That's a thing you do when you're done. So Vim is hard. There is a tool that you can use to learn more about Vim. Instead of typing Vim, you can type Vim Tutor. And when you type Vim Tutor, it launches Vim with special settings and a special file to help you learn the basics of Vim. So if you want to try your hand at Vim, start with Vim Tutor. It takes about 30 minutes to go through, and it will teach you way more about Vim than I just did in the 5 minutes that I spent. However, again, I want to discourage you from using Vim. Instead, I want you to use Nano. The reason Nano is good is because it's modeless. Whenever you type keys, they are going directly into the content of your document. There's only one mode. It's the equivalent of insert mode in Vim. You are always adding content. The help at the bottom of the screen shows you the most used commands. And the very first one it shows you, you can see at the bottom left, is Control G. That up arrow means control. And if I hit Control G, oops, forgot this keyboard, Control G, it shows you the full help. Now, the help in Nano is much smaller than the help in Vim because it's a much smaller editor and there's much less to say. There's no special movement keys in Nano. You just use the arrows. And the bottom section, the bottom 2 lines of the screen, always shows you the help for the most common commands that you would use in the situation you're in right now. Now, you see, if you look, a lot of those commands listed at the bottom of the screen start with an up arrow. We already said that means control. But if you see those 2 commands at the very right of the bottom, you'll see they start with M. M stands for meta. And on your keyboard, meta is keyed in with either the Option key or the Alt key or the Command key. And the help will tell you that. If you want to close the help, you say Control X. If you want to close this file that we're working on right now, you say Control X. But it asks, do you want to save it? If I say yes with a Y, then it wants me to type the name. Now, you don't see an insertion point here, but if you see that inverted line just above the help commands, that's where it wants me to type the actual name of the file that I'm making. And I can control, before I hit return, what format to write this file in with the meta keys. As you see, I could write it in DOS format or Mac format. I could make sure it writes a backup file, etc. So Nano is always helping you, and it's always in insert mode. And like Vim, it's always available on a remote system that you log into. There are configuration things that you will want to change. For instance, Git's default, if you use Git, if you write source code and you're committing with Git, the default editor for Git is Vim. You can change that in your Git configuration file. You can change it to Nano, and that will just work, and your life will suddenly become better. I am actually going to write that out, and now if I say ls, you can see that there is the nano_demo.txt file, top line middle of the thing that just got printed out, and I can cat it, and it just says, hello, this is Nano. I want to make sure you know I love Vim. I would love it for you to learn Vim. There are videos on how to use Vim. There's lots of instructions on how to use Vim. Vim is incredibly powerful, incredibly configurable. It's incredibly fun to use once you're good at it. But if you're just starting, Nano is probably the right answer for you. And I think that concludes everything I want to say. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. Thank you. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation tonight. Now we're going to open it up to questions, if there's any. Unmute your microphone and ask your questions.
We
Wolf,
like questions.
yes, Wolf, what was the special cat command you used that showed the file name and the line numbers and everything color coded?
Okay, so I use a lot of special tools, which I have talked about in a previous mug video called Modern Shell Tools. My dot files are available on my GitHub account, which is github.com/wolf. And the specific tool that I use is called BAT, B-A-T, like the flying mouse animal. And I alias it to cat. So when I say cat, what I'm really saying is BAT. And it does syntax highlighting. It does line numbering. It does, it tells you the file name at the top. If I bat out multiple files, it'll put a file name line in between each. I like it a lot better than cat. But if you use it for any of the specialized things that cat can do, like catting one file into another or catting two files together into another, it will automatically act just like cat. It won't do any of its special things. So you can see how to do all of these things in my dot files on github.com/wolf/dot-files.
All right, thank you.
More questions?
Okay, so I guess I'll you can go ahead first. So you raise your hand.
Okay, great. So we've seen, just recently a little bit about Nano and, you preferring that over like Vim because Vim is complicated. And I think we've been hearing like eons ago about, Linux taking over the desktop, and that never seems to happen. And I guess what I'm after is what's holding us back still? Is there, something, it seems like there's a lot of real easy tools out there, but it seems like we keep loading up all kinds of complicated stuff that is hard to learn. And I don't know if maybe there's the easy version, the distro. There is a distro out there, I know, and I'm just wondering. I'm trolling a little bit, but so how do we make this easy for and finally get to the point where people just use Linux instead of Windows or whatever?
I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we have started down that path with more manufacturers of hardware that are shipping with Linux preloaded. You've got Steam selling their gaming platform with Linux pre-installed. You've got, System 76 selling desktops that are pre-installed with Linux. Even Lenovo and Dell are distributing hardware with Linux pre-installed. It's getting there, and you have to give the easy button, which is, Chrome OS is technically Linux. It's a Linux desktop, although it might be hard, shoehorned, and they cut the tendons out of the Achilles heel. Yeah, it's still a Linux desktop. Technically, it's a Linux kernel running a desktop environment. So I think that it's giving the easy button to users will be what really propagates Linux to the desktop environment of choice. Not choice, because choosing desktops is hard. Nobody wants to do it. They just want to go, I bought a computer from Best Buy. It works. I get to the internet. It's great. That's what they want. And, giving choice is awesome. But
for most people
also is hard because decisions are hard. They just want to be told that this is the tool you should use and this is how you should use it, and you should move on.
And at work, they tell you to use Windows, and they buy you a Windows machine.
Now they are getting better. They're getting better about some places supporting Linux as a desktop. There are places getting better about supporting Mac OS as a desktop in the corporate environment. But really, it's Windows made a really great gig about this is how we make the enterprise use Windows.
The killer app is the web browser, right? Everybody's desktop now, they're just using a web browser to do what they need to do. How many people are really using the desktop? To me, the desktop is boring. It's all back in the server, and Linux clearly has won the server wars, right?
Yeah, I think if you count compute, Linux has won.
Yeah.
How many systems are running Linux? Linux has won.
Developers, on the other hand, a lot of developers love Linux. Linux is great for developers, even on the desktop or in the server, whatever. Some people are forced to use Windows because that's what their company tells them. Some people are fortunate to have a choice. Maybe they get to run Mac OS. Maybe they get to run Linux, but I don't know. I've been using Linux for so long, and I'm so tired of fighting the fight about Linux on the desktop. I was deep in it back in the 2000, from 1999 till about 2008. I was really, really deep into promoting Linux on the desktop, and I got burned out by it. I know the server.
I
That's where I'm
know.
at.
So we had Jim.
All right, good to see you. Yeah.
Jim, we had a question in the chat about briefly installing Git server. Well, I think that's a topic in and of itself.
Git server.
Yeah. And so having two users collaborate, I would point you to GitHub or GitLab.
Sure.
Because they're running the server, all you have to run is Git, which is the protocol on your side.
Right. Right.
And because the server, there are all different, there are a whole number of servers you could run that provide the Git endpoint as a shared collaboration. But to get started, use GitHub or GitLab. If you don't like GitHub's policies because they're owned by Microsoft, use GitLab. If you don't like GitLab because they have a corporate environment and they sell you a license, use GitHub. And if you don't like either one of them, then just use Git locally and upload the files to another server and share them.
Well, so we have a combination. So I worked at this big company, and they were testing out Git. So here's hundreds of these programmers saying, hey, we should be using Git instead of these other file management systems and all that. And so they brought it into my lab and they set it up, and they had hundreds. Like 700 people coming in and using this in this little lab I had. So I said, okay, we need to make this into a productionized type of environment. But they were using, all kinds of little tools, right? So it isn't just you had to set up your GitHub and you have your Git and your GitLabs and all that stuff. There's just tons of different things that they throw out there, and everybody's doing, rolling their own and making things all, specific to their needs. And it's a kind of a wild west out there. Or at least it was, 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, GitHub is fully hosted by Microsoft, and I'm using GitHub for my company and even for my personal projects. GitHub is great for me. GitLab, on the other hand, there is the hosted version of it where they'll run it for you, or you can install GitLab on your own hardware. And I did that for a number of years. And I was quite happy with that.
There's also,
I would say if you were just looking for
running an SSH server on your server. If you just have SSH and have the paths to the Git directories, Git just works.
Yeah, you don't.
I would say
need
if you really want to run a Git server for two people, Git TEA is a nice option. It is very much a small number of users Git server. And you'd have to find where they're at, but Git T is a nice option for just a small number of users.
Sure. But like Wolf was pointing out, you don't even need any special software. You can have your repo on a server that you can access using SSH, and that is your upstream SSH, your upstream Git repo. You can push to it and pull from it, and just like that, there's no GUI. GitLab and GitHub will give you a nice graphical user interface, a web-based interface, and manage all kinds of things for you. But if you just have two people collaborating on a project, put it on a server somewhere and run and use SSH to get to it. Anybody else?
So I guess my question is more so just from asking for people with more experience and stuff. Been building a home server just to get experience and stuff. Bored, like I enjoy it stuff. So I was wondering from as opposed, I guess what is DHCP?
DHCP, sure.
DHCP, using that as when I theoretically, I guess, is there a way to, when your IP address changes, is there a way to keep that updated as opposed to using a static IP?
When you say, well, hang on a second. When you say your IP address changes, are you talking about like through your ISP, through your cable modem?
No, if I wanted to like set it to change on my own, on my end, not from my ISP, because I know they automatically do that. But if I wanted to, I guess I was like I know I can just set the static IP and be able to connect to that server.
Sure. Well, your router may handle may be a DHCP server for you. I years ago I did a lot of configuring DHCP servers for a network, and yeah, you can set up a DHCP server. There's also a simpler version called DNS Mask. I think it's DNS MASQ, which is kind of a much simpler version of. It uses the DHCP protocol, but it's easier to set up than the old, I forget who makes the
Bind.
I'm sorry?
Bind.
Well, Bind is DNS.
Yeah, that's the heavyweight DNS, and DNS Mask.
Well, that's just DNS though, but DNS Mask will
DHCP.
actually do. DNS Mask will actually do DHCP things for you, like a pool of addresses, and other great, the thing about a DHCP server is it'll not only give you an IP address, it'll give you the default route, it'll give you your DNS server information. It can give you a whole host of things.
My question is more so like, why not? Like, just like that's like.
Well, it's great to learn. It's great to learn, and it's helpful because you're gonna, you run into situations where maybe you're setting up a router at home, your cable modem or your integrated cable modem router, and it offers to do DHCP for you. Well, it'd be nice to understand what that means and what what that is. Yeah. So I encourage you to dig into that a little bit if you can.
I'm gonna drop
DHCP
off.
is great.
Talk to you guys. Yeah,
great
I'm gonna watch the debate. Talk to you later.
Yeah, I got like a hard out in 5 minutes because I want to watch it too.
Oh goodness, it is almost. Jeez.
Yeah, it's 5 to 9.
Oh, goodness.
So yeah, if you want to learn DHCP, definitely. Yeah, definitely learn it because it's pretty cool.
Trying to get people
I'm gonna just mess with like, oh, there's something new. Let's try it. Because now I got the personal server. I'm just trying. So
sure. Well, I mean, if you're going to do it though, you're going to need 2 servers, right?
I was looking at a schema board to separate it so I can have something that takes care of all that stuff.
Yeah, set up your DHCP server and then have another machine on the network that gets an IP address from that server. Yeah.
Okay, so at least I'm sniffing down right now. So
yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Anybody else? Like I said, the debate starts in 4 minutes, so I'm definitely going to be tuning out and checking out the debate because I'm kind of interested.
All right.
What happens? Too. Anybody else?
Yep.
Great talk.
Are we good tonight? There will be a meeting next month. Remember Michael Lucas talking about how to run your own mail server. You may be interested in that.
I'll look for an email, Jim, later about the board meeting.
Yeah.
Dave, well, normally we
Send me an email. We'll talk about it later. We don't want to hold anybody
Okay.
up from the things they want to do.
All right. We'll do that. All right.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.